Hey everyone, I'm Chris Wall, executive producer of the Wingfeather Saga animated series. My good friend.
I'm Andrew Peterson. I'm the author of the books and one of the executive producers.
Thanks for joining us tonight, and apologies for my voice right out the gate. Sick a little early this week, and it's a little rough, but thank you for joining us tonight.
You should have heard him 2 days ago.
It was hilarious. I got laughed at by the crew a lot. But we're so excited tonight. We have a lot of cool stuff coming out this fall around Wingfeather Saga. You know, the animated series started almost a year ago, and we are heavily at work on season 2, and it's looking amazing.
It's amazing.
We go mix episode 1 next week.
Yeah. I just watched the first little version of the most recent version yesterday, and my jaw was dropped.
It just fell on the floor. But that doesn't come out till spring. And so in the meantime, we are going to be talking a lot about cool stuff inside of season 1 that you may have missed. If you haven't seen the series, please go watch it. You can watch it for free at angel.com/wingfeather. And we are going to be giving you lots more insights, including this super cool new product, new item that is finally done. And so to tell you more about it, we have a little trailer to show you. So check this out. So there it is. An art book. Wow. We're so excited to be able to hold this in our hands. It's taken months, hours and hours of work. So glad to welcome Garrett Taylor, Daniel Hickox. Garrett is our art director. Daniel is our art coordinator. And both of you spent enormous amounts of hours on this. Of course, we have to acknowledge that this book would not exist without the leadership and effort of Brock Starnes on our team. We just did a fantastic job. He's hiding off camera. But he did a fantastic job helping us to even make this real. I can't believe it's like real.
It's got a little book. See this little ribbon bookmark?
So many times in our journey, we have had these like blocks of like, we're not going to get to go forward making the series. And to be holding an art book at the end of this, like shows like ours don't get to have this opportunity very often.
What I love about it too is that we have talked about the art of book before we imagined this moment like before we even made the show.
That's right.
Because the whole, half the idea that Keith Lango was always talking about was like, how in the art of books, we always geek out over the art of, and then there's something that's lost between the book and the screen, and we tried to capture it.
And so you might be asking, why would we make an art book? Well, we're going to tell you about it. We're going to talk a little bit about our journey and the contributions we wanted to reveal. And there are just some exclusive parts of that story that we've really packed in here. Our friend Jonathan Rogers helped us to really map out the narrative. So over the course of this book, it actually takes you through our journey from Andrew and I, like, hey, could we make this thing a reality, all the way to its completion in episode 6 of season 1. It does so kind of along the episodes. It's a fun journey, both celebrating the season 1 and our own journey and making it parallel to that. So a lot of investors came alongside, nearly 10,000 people to help us make this series, and we're so thankful to all of them. They've made this reality as much as the series, so super cool. One of the things I forgot to mention at the intro is that we have been doing a contest, a Wingfeather Singoff contest. Have you seen any of the submissions on this yet?
No, I have not.
Okay. So at the end, we're going to announce the winner to that. We've been delighted. I've gotten to see some of these, and they're just a blast. But we're going to announce the winner for our Wingfeather Sing-Off, celebrating our soundtrack that's out in the world, another item that's in the world that I didn't think we'd ever get to make.
Yeah.
There it is. So
cool.
Lots of fun stuff to celebrate. Also, if you're interested in this book, as you saw in the URL, just angel.com/wingfeatherart. It is available for pre-order, shipping very soon. And we're so excited to see some of you already responding on that.
Hey, so pause.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm a book nerd. I collect books. I care deeply about how a book smells and looks and feels. And this book, the team that put this together, it's not just the stuff that's in it. The actual artifact is amazing. Like,
well, and when
the
you're
dust
putting
jacket
it with like these, right?
Yeah.
It's got
And
to feel
better. It's better, Chris. And like, not only, it's got a dust jacket, like it's embossed, but also, I mean, take off there's an embossed Wingfeather W here. It's this. It is just a beautiful piece of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love all the imprint stuff on the inside.
I know.
Oh, this one's signed. Ooh.
It's signed. And I'm
That's
keeping it. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, it's well printed.
So I know we're going to
It's
get
well
into
done.
what's inside the book, but as like just an artifact, I want to point out how beautiful it is.
So if you want to win a copy of one of these books here, we're doing a little thing in the comments. So if you'll comment and tag a friend, we'll have a pick one lucky winner out of there tonight. So comment, tag a friend, and we're going to pick one, and we'll announce it tomorrow on the Instagram stories. So one of these will go out of here.
It's 150 pages long, by the way.
You counted it? It's good.
I counted it.
Yeah, just now.
I got to page 150 and I realized that the pages were numbered.
That was it.
No, but 150 pages, and we were doing the math on how many pieces of art are in here. Like it's at least like 500 or 600,
It's a lot of art.
which is a fraction of what was actually made for the show.
All right, so let's dive into said art, shall we?
Let's do it.
So the beginning of this journey obviously starts with, and I'm going to be the control guy here, so it's super cool. Starts with designs, right? And some of the book gets into this, just covering the actual characters and figuring out who they are and how they're going to work in our world.
Yeah.
This was a part that the two of you got to jump in right at the beginning. Talk a little bit about this and some of these early inspirations of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the characters that we end up shooting for are a huge part of the show. It's what we follow. It's kind of what drives the story. And it looks like here we're looking at some of the creatures. But one of the fun things we got to do that other shows don't is that there's been a lot of these creatures already designed in the books. And so our readers and our fans all kind of have an image in their head of what these should look like. But we got to take a fresh stab at it. And so we kind of just did all kinds of sketches. I love this part of seeing art of books where you just get the really loose kind of drawings. Mm-hmm. Some of the tighter, more boring things like the turnarounds where you got to draw everything from a side view and a front view. But that goes into building the thing in 3D, which is really cool.
One of my favorite, it's not in this little slide here, but one of my favorites is their area where we're exploring fangs, right? Like body types and faces and like all the ways they could be done.
Yeah, that was a huge one. It's just like how much of a lizard are they? How much of a monster are they? And we kind of landed somewhere in between the two. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff you read in the book and have your own image in your mind.
Going back one, I have to comment, from a design standpoint, I'm sure there's a bit where it's like, we shouldn't do this because it's kind of cluttered. But I love that every one of these images has down at the bottom who was a part of it. You know?
Yeah.
And so much of our production, we've had a blast kind of making visible all the people that have contributed, right? That it's not like just some artwork in the world. Who did it? I don't know. Somebody at that studio. It's like, no, it's this person. You should beat them, right?
Exactly. And I think just to go back to like what an art of book is, like we've got a stack of them here. But, as far as I know, most animated movies, the big budget animated movies come out with some form of a book that just encapsulates the artwork because otherwise it would just go into the archives and you would never see it. You just see the final product, which doesn't have any of the actual design work that went into it. And
Sure.
So I just remember as a kid just poring over these things.
Me too.
Because it was just so full of really that you see the handiwork of each individual artist, and it's obviously handpicked to some of the best stuff, but it just drives that kind of creativity and inspiration.
I would guess there's probably a whole lot of kids out there who got into art because of these books.
Yeah,
Because they were like, oh, people do this. This is a thing. This is how
Yeah.
movies get made or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, in school, they were kind of my textbook. Like, I would pull up in these and I'd see what was on the page. And I'd be like, all right, I need to work on these kind of things or push towards this or that. And you see the whole process, which be hard to see when on the screen.
Didn't you have a story about when you first started getting into this? It was you were already trained as an artist, and you got an art book, and you were like, well, I need to just be that good.
Yeah,
Isn't that
that's actually something I advise when people come up and say, hey, how can I get into the industry, or what's the kind of standard? I said, just go buy an art of book, and until you can draw stuff that looks like that, then you still got a ways to go. Yeah. And yet so much of it is achievable, and it just gives you an idea of what the design process looks like. So yeah, they're awesome, and I think that they are tied to a story, and yet they stand alone as just this kind of cool bit of, hey, here's a bunch of artwork that a bunch of people did.
This page here brings me such joy because it is years apart. Right, so we've got bottom left and right here, Nicholas Cole doing some color work, trying to find this space. That was Lila Wagner over here that worked on the short. Pat Martinet, an old friend and colleague of ours, working on the interior. Just so many different hands as we worked on the space over the creation of the short film, and then making the final version for the animated series. Eustace joining and Trudy.
Yeah, and something that's unique about this art of book is that we are documenting the whole journey, like you said, Chris. So that's what we're seeing here, where we're taking it back to the kind of original short, pulling up that artwork, and once you guys get a chance to read the text, it's all about kind of the thought process that brought us from the short into the first season, and some of the technical changes and difficulties, and just where we wanted to update things, where we wanted to just pull certain things straight into it, which is cool.
And so many of these concept pieces ended up making their way into final imagery, right? So I think what's cool is for everybody that's watched the series, you've seen the finals, and now you're seeing just a bit of like what it took to get there. This is a great piece for Torboro. I mean, so many different ideas. I know, Andrew, we talked about this. It's got to look like a cat, but not too much like a cat.
Yeah, Thorn the Tor had a thing for kittens, and so he designed the castle to look like a crouching kitten, which was something I wrote in the book, but I was like, I don't really know what that looks like.
It's easy to write.
Yeah, and then somebody's gonna figure out how does it look like a cat exactly, and it does.
I love like thinking like, is it an upright cat? Is it a laid down cat? Is it what shape we're looking for?
Cats. I love the cats follow like window call
Oh,
outs.
yeah. I never noticed that.
Yes, we thought a lot.
That's amazing.
Of that kind of thing. There's little motifs everywhere.
Brilliant.
So this one, I think it's like the second time we visit Torboro, you actually get the good shot where it's like the first time we see it, it's like from this angle, it's not quite as visible. And the second time, like, I see the cat.
Yeah, and everybody has a different way of working, and the hope in these kind of books is to capture that. So you could start with 3D, mocking something like this up and drawing over. I think that's what we're seeing over here by Eustace, and then these ones on the right are just straight sketches, just kind of ideas on the page, which is awesome.
Now we get into kind of the more specific background paintings. This is stuff you guys probably saw in the show, but now the characters are turned off, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so here's stuff that goes from concept all the way forward. For production, it's mapping out the layers that are necessary for to shoot through them. We'll shoot that a little bit later. This kind of the trick of how to bring this stuff into UE. But talk about the process here, because I think it's interesting for those at home that don't know about this, that the story artist, we saw a little bit of those earlier, will draw the boards for where the camera needs to shoot, and then you guys come back behind and say, okay, we need to paint backgrounds to accommodate that shooting angle. So you guys actually start, like tell us, what's the location going to be like? Okay, it's going to be like this. Great. Now story department goes, well, I want to shoot it. So they shoot it. And you guys go, okay, well then it's going to look like this for that camera.
Exactly.
So a little bit, this is obviously Dragon Day Festival, episode 1.
Yeah. Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what we're doing is we're taking the boards, we're taking the CG layout, and then interpreting, kind of adding the details and the color and the extra little touches to it. Like, I'm so glad that these backgrounds are in the book, because those top two on the left page are some of my favorites, where there's so many little hints and kind of Easter eggs for the fans in there.
Can I point out the Easter eggs you want to point out?
Well, you go, and I'll get the one.
Well, this is these two are by Aiden Peterson, an artist that I really, really like.
Yeah, he's great.
But so this, Kent, you want to say who this is?
Yeah, so that's our friend Sam is the man that painted the bird on his
He's one of
head.
the storyboard artists.
Yeah, we always try to fit him into every project that we do somewhere. But then you can see a bunch of different creatures.
Yeah, these are paintings are from the Pembroke's Creaturepedia, which Aiden illustrated. So he put the Bomnubble there, and I think that's the what is the mushroom guy named? I can't remember his name. Anyway, but yeah,
Say it in the chat.
one of the joys of the art of book is that you have time. It's not a show where it's going by to like look at all the fun that was had by the artists in the process.
The little stuffed animal Bomnubble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that marionette is a short film that our friends did too.
Wait, which one?
There's a marionette hanging on the side of that.
Oh, right there.
That's Ember.
Oh,
What they call it.
that's so cool.
Yeah, so there's
I didn't
a
realize.
little like.
And this actually is a production thing. So when you want to have like all this amazing detail, if you were to do this in CG, if I was going to model this in it's very expensive to make it this lush and interesting. And one of the cool things, because of our show being a 2D and CG, is that we can add all this amazing detail in 2D that we just couldn't afford at our level of kind of television show in CG. We'd have a kind of a blander version of that, you know? And it's funny because we will watch shows where it's like very limited what the backgrounds and environments are, and you know why. You know? Like Pocoyo, right? Like it's white. So it's like, oh, I know why they did that.
Yeah.
In our case, we get to really make a lush environment, which, you know, we see even more as we go forward in the season.
Yeah, it's cool too just to see. I think at our max we had maybe 12 background artists, 10 to 12.
Yeah.
And so, you know, overall the style matches. It's something we're constantly driving for. Is like, okay, we want to make sure each shot feels like it's from the same world. But within that, each artist does have their own nuance.
Right.
And in the art of book, maybe as you guys look through it, you'll be able to kind of see that as they have their names below them. But to me, it gives it a neat kind of richness. Especially, I mean, we try to give each artist their own sequence so that there's a continuity. But between sequences, there's just some cool little subtleties. That's just the way they paint.
And as art director, I know you resource them with kind of pulling some of that together, using similar brushes and color palettes and this sort of thing, and kind of arranging that a bit, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we have a color script that we try to stick pretty closely to.
It's in this book, so you'll get to see the color script.
Color script in there, and yeah, for sure we want it to not bump. We want the style to just feel comfortable.
Ah, so cool.
You know, this is interesting because, of course, Nicholas drew an early version of this cottage, and it was so inspirational for us. And he was like so horrified about it because, and Nicholas, you do great work on it, so I'm not knocking it, but he was like, I hate trying to keep perspective and, you know, on a structure like this. And but it was so inspirational, like, okay, that's a really cool farmhouse. And then taking that to this version of it, and, you know, you wanted to work really hard, Garrett, on its construction and weight and, you know, making sure that we believed kind of the, and you know, Keith picked at this a lot. Like if it got whimsical and like, wait, I'm suddenly in Dr. Seuss, right?
Yeah.
That like we lose a groundedness in here. Talk about that in the construction of the farm itself.
Yeah, I think for this, I was just really inspired by the kind of old farmhouses here in Tennessee, where someone would just buy a piece of land covered in trees, cut the trees down, and make a house out of it. So the log cabin.
That's what I did.
Is it?
Yeah, totally.
It's modeled after Andrew's house. So yeah, it's just old classic log cabin with, you know, the big old hand-hewn shingles, and I mean the whole essence of this being kind of the center of season one as just the kind of picture of home that we all think of, which of course gets lost in the end, but it's the idea of it remains.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that painting in the upper left there by CJ really captures that kind of warmth.
I remember, I think was it you that had the idea to soften the corners of the roof of the house? I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
You were just saying that it like if these had come to a point, it wouldn't have looked quite as cozy and soft
Yeah.
and rounded.
Exactly, the gable ends there. Yeah,
Little
just,
thing like that, yeah.
just rounding and softening is just a tool to add that warmth. But then the garden too, this is all Trudy's stuff, who kind of pioneered that look. You know, there was so much kind of dynamic shots in there with the thwaps. Took a lot of just technical planning
She did an awesome job, and she hadn't really drawn too many vegetables or plants before this. I just threw her into it. She did great.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's in Germany and calls lettuce salad.
Yes.
One of the things I know Nicholas was super excited about, that there was a hint in the short that we actually maintained, was some of this kind of hand scroll work on some of the posts on the porch. You know, that imagining that Poto and maybe the boys would have done some carving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all driving towards that idea of putting story into just the design itself. That Nicholas always loved that, and so we tried to carry that through with the locations and the props and the characters, and so it's fun to see that carry through.
This is obviously Tink. Obviously.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
So our good friend Tom Owens, you know, we'll talk about here a little bit in Keith here, but you know, way back 2015 would have been about this time of year.
Crazy.
We sat down and said, "Hey, what do you think?" And we started doodling. And Tom's a brilliant story artist. We worked together at DreamWorks a little bit, and was story artist on How to Train Your Dragon, and head of Story on Dragon 2. And this was his kind of take, what it would look like. So I love including it here. Like, that's a version of Think.
This to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Nicholas Cole came along in 2016 and was like, well, what if it was like this? And came to kind of a different version. Actually, this drawing right up here was one of his first ones.
Yep.
And then to our version today.
And are these your notes, Garrett?
No, those are, Nicholas Cole as we took Tink into 3D, we really needed some clarity on how that shape turned. And so those are Nicholas's notes, which are great. This just kind of shows the two sides of design for animation, I think, where there's this sense you want to create something full of energy, a drawing that has that kind of life to it, and yet that needs to translate oftentimes in a CG type animated show into 3D. And in our case, for our characters, are modeled and textured in CG. So this kind of structure notes and thought is almost as important as the design itself, because if it doesn't translate into that model, it just gets lost.
What I love too about like Tom's drawings over here, while the character is different, so much of the ideas that Tom was driving at, you know, with tied off belts and things like this, those ideas we were all in the same space, even though like, obviously he looks so much different.
Yeah, I think Janner actually got the tied off belt.
Yeah, that's right. Switching them. And I know Tom would talk about this, but Hank Ketchum was a big influence here on just kind of the character designs and what he was thinking about. He was like, I want to go back to that, Cool.
Yeah, it's really just fun seeing the whole process. I mean, my very first job on the Wingfeather Saga was archiving all this old stuff.
Yeah.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was really fun, because when we got to the book, I was like, all right, I know just where to start and go digging really, really deep to find these
That's cool.
old drawings. They're so beautiful.
That's great.
Oh.
And that gets us to then the implementation when it's in the show. And in this part of the journey, we want to switch over and talk a little bit with Keith about taking all these people paintings into Unreal Engine and kind of how we do that. And again, it was the inspiration to start this was how do you get the art on screen and not change it too much, right? Like how do we make that work within an animated series? And so the next part of our journey. But Garrett, this is amazing getting to see all this playing here. I know, Daniel, for you, it was an enormous lift choosing among, I think, was it almost 1,000 paintings that were incorporated in season 1?
Yeah, it was tough. It was definitely tough to pick what made it to the book, because like Garrett said before, it's like not every piece of art that we make can make it into the book, even though there's still hundreds of pieces that are in the book itself. So I think when choosing the paintings, we were looking for something that really encapsulated the space well, and where you really just got to appreciate just the breadth of the design. Because we do plenty of paintings that are just of cobblestones or one tree, but we're kind of looking for the thing that showed you the most. Like something like this, where you're really just getting to see the entire space.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to all of the artists that are represented here. We've got artists all over the world that have contributed at different levels, some of which are continuing on with us, and just put in hours every week of just their dedication and creativity. And so I'm so thankful that it shows up here. To Daniel for managing this whole project. Publishing a book is a big deal on its own. And then John Trent, who designed all the text and stuff, did such a great job.
Yeah, John did an amazing job of like finding out how to make it all. Like, here's the art, here's the words from Jonathan Rogers. Now, John, figure out how to all work together and make it look appealing, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm like an art of book nerd, and so I was so worried when we were doing this project that it was just gonna kind of just be like a book that had art in it and not like an art of book. And so when John turned back his draft, I was like, all right, this is legit. This is an art of book. It's so awesome.
It's great. Awesome. Garrett, Daniel, thanks for joining us. See you all soon.
Thanks.
Keith, welcome. Glad to see you.
Glad to be here.
So, I mentioned Andrew earlier, but it's 2015, about this time of year, that we first talked about, hey, you want to mess with this Wingfeather thing.
Yeah.
And one of the early ideas was, like we talked about, these art of books that we had all gotten and loved. And could we get this kind of richness and sense of craft on the screen without having to filter it? And I think at the time I had a DreamWorks art of book for the Tattooed Santa one. What was that one? Remember that one?
Guardians or something like
The
that?
Guardians, yeah. It's a weird name.
Legends of the Guardians.
Yeah. See, and the art of that book is just amazing. I mean, the movie looked beautiful, and I came out of the movie going, wow, this is fantastic. And then I saw the art of book, and I was like, that's even better. Why does CG animation, have to go through this process of losing some fidelity? Like earlier, Garrett was holding this up. Like, look at that look image. It's amazing. Like, this is astonishing, right? It's a beautiful piece of artwork, and yet there's something that has to happen, I guess, in the process. And so the question was, Keith, is there a way we can do this?
Yeah.
That doesn't do that. Talk about some of the early philosophy getting into this. And we don't go too much into the technical weeds, but just like, how do you take this kind of thing and make it work with an animation?
You just have to understand what the DNA is of what you're trying to make. So fundamentally, computer graphics has always indexed itself to recreating realism. So ultimately, it's a digital photograph you're trying to create. Okay. Whereas this stuff is not intended to be photographic in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's intended to be illustrative or painting. So you cannot really, it's very difficult, I'll say, to make a painting with a camera. You do it with paint brushes and art and and handwork and pigments and physical things. And there are things you can do to an image to, like we all know the Photoshop filters, you throw this little thing on, but it looks just like a filter. And it's a thing you slap on top. And you can tell that its very DNA is not a hand expression of an artistic vision in an illustration or painting kind of way. So everything in computer graphics from the very beginning of it was intended to recreate a physical camera. We are like, that's cool. We want to use a physical camera to take a picture of painting. So instead of taking a picture of a diner, we want to go to a gallery and take a picture of a painting of a diner, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so for us, okay, cool, there's nothing inherently limiting that inside of CG. It just depends on what you decide to point that camera at. And so typically in CG, you end up with people making things that have a high verisimilitude to realism. You make the shapes, you make the materials, you make the colors on it, you make the light and the shadow, the way light falls on things, and you say, I want it to look like a photo. And so every piece of technology is geared towards that end. We're like, cool, not what we want. So we had to come up with our own way of doing things. And so we had to make our own way of how light and shadow play on a character or on an object. We had to make our own understanding of how to represent light going from dark, bright spots to dark spots, and how that transitions in a way that's painterly and not in a way that's photographic. And so with the art of book, in the paintings, it's simple. We take the paintings, we literally put them on cards, and we put them in front of the camera. And we say, there you go. That's pretty, actually, it's really nice because the fidelity of the representation is honest. We get beautiful paintings from Garrett and his crew, and we're like, boom, put that up there. Great. Job one done.
So then, I guess what you're saying is, so if this being a beautiful painting of Peachtree House,
right,
but I've got to put a three-dimensional Pete, like my hand, and make it feel like it.
yeah. Otherwise, it looks like a bad green screen effect.
Yeah, right. Like we've all seen those. Right?
Oh, sure,
It's
yeah.
interesting because we talk about the fact that we're using this amazing photoreal engine, Unreal Engine,
Yeah.
for our show, and everybody thinks about Mandalorian, right, or something
Sure,
like this.
sure.
Oh, you do it, and we're like, yeah, we're not using it that way.
Yeah.
We're using it in other ways, and I think this scene behind us obviously represents one of the most challenging
Oh,
in
yeah.
season 1, which is where we had to have it's a dark environment. That's already got fidelity questions, but we got to have flame, we got to have highlighting and glinting off of shields and swords.
Mhm.
A lot of things that created significant challenges for the art style. Like,
Yes.
there's ways that the video game engine does that very well, actually, in lots of
Sure.
video games. But we're trying to use it artistically and in a craft way. So talk a little bit about this scene in particular,
Sure.
and getting those three-dimensional characters to sit in the scene.
Well, the number one thing we do is we use the painting, the background paintings that are designed, or those designs of that space. We use that as the gene pool of imagery that we're pulling from.
Okay.
So our goal is not to modify the paintings to work with the characters. It's the other way around.
Aye.
All right. So we take everything in our shader system and our light system for our main characters is pretty hefty. It's not, you wouldn't use it for a video game because it's not super, what they call performant. It's not very fast. Well, I mean, for us, it's blazing fast, but for a video game, it's a little pokey. But it's doing a lot of things in there. There's a lot of actual sampled, hand-drawn paint strokes that are built into how the shader thinks.
Cool.
All right, so we actually take samples of these paint strokes, and some of them, they didn't exist, so I made them, all right? And go into, a paint system, you take the picture, you bring it in, and you make a black and white image out of that, and you say, that's the spirit of how we want to transition from this to this. And so we do a lot of work there. We also don't, one of the things about CG is what I call the object permanence is very certain, meaning the boundaries of this physical book are very clean and they're very defined, as they would be in real life. And we don't want that. We actually don't want the edges to be defined and clean because they're too crispy. They feel like a real thing in front of a painting instead of pushing into the painting. So we're always trying to find ways to take the character and visually smush it into the painting and take the painting and visually pull it over the character. And we have to do that through, to not get too nerdy, through a lot of pixels filtering, a lot of post-processing that is all real-time. It's built into our shader system that allows us to kind of just drop our character in, turn it on, and go, all right, now we just move some lighting around. And as long as the lighting feels good, so much of it carries forward. We have full control over the entire hue, saturation, brightness, contrast range as well. All that stuff. So for us, it's about pushing them in. So for these, getting the characters in here, for this scene, it's the same for all scenes. That's vanilla starting, that's showing up to work on Monday and doing our job. For this scene, we had fire, which is, it has its own challenges because usually it's pretty expensive to simulate. And
Super hot too.
it tends to be a little warm to touch.
Dangerous.
Yeah. And
my
so we felt like we need to lean into our 2D aspect of this. And so we had two lovely, wonderful, talented 2D effects artists working for us out of Europe. Ali Ellen and Catherine, they were great. And Catherine did all our fire animation for us. And we're just like, do 2D, like old school, Disney old school, right? And we're like, just do this. We, Garrett and I gave some feedback on it, how we wanted it to behave. And then we had to find a way to integrate that in the engine. So we made our own little flipbook asset that took that animation, put it onto a thing, onto a kind of plane. We made a flipbook out of it so it would play back at the speed we want and stuff. And then we put it in the world space wherever it makes sense relative to the camera, to the characters, and to the background environment. And one of the wonderful things about it was, like, this reminds me of something. And I was just sitting there thinking, what is it? And I'm like, oh, this reminds me of, like, way back on Fantasia, on a film that was done in 1940s, like the Night on Bald Mountain sequence, where like, oh, this feels like that. So that was really rewarding and fun. The unfortunate aspect of that is that everything has to be handcrafted, and sometimes we have to kind of move along a little faster.
Sure.
So then we created our own, what we call CG versions of fire or water or dust or things that are, effects like that. But they're built into a particle emitter but what the particle emitter is doing is, again, not indexed at all to realism. It's all about, does it look like a painting?
Mm-hmm.
And so the core, like everything into the underlying imagery that this thing makes is drawing from paintings, even down inside of its guts. Like there are nodes inside the shader system that are just literally paint stroke samples. And it's pulling from those to know how to make things work.
So cool.
Yeah.
Do you remember when I taught you how to do all these things?
It was sometime around 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I remember that. It was. I'm really glad I was able to.
Yeah, we were at Chipotle, and you had the burrito bowl.
So you kind of move through this, but light sourcing in this scene obviously is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
There's the computer is having to do lighting on our characters, right? So we have Slarb and Poto in this big fight sequence in here in episode 6. They're needing to be lit. I remember this breakthrough you had of like he's going to hold the torch and you're going to see that it lights him, and like it flickers like a fire, which is the computer simulating a 2D bit of animation on flame over a background which has lighting in it, right? So I think one of the ideas that is familiar to us, but is that this has lighting in it. The painting is painted with lighting. It can be painted flat or with lighting, and this has the fire and the shadows cast. You have to kind of match that in the computer to make it feel like the characters are part of that same environment. And this is one of the more striking ones. Like at daytime, cloudy day, easy. Here, the real belief that sharp light and the shadow and the heat of the fire, that is actually like someone's going to die in there.
Yeah. That was tough because normally if we were just doing our show like everybody else, we would take a character who's modeled and shaded, you put them in there and you put a light on them, just like we have lights around us. You do the same thing in the computer. You just put lights around it and it looks the way you want. And if you put lights on the wall and if you put fire light here. So, but because we wrote our own lighting system for our characters, those lights that are off the shelf that you get when you buy Unreal, you just download it for free. Those lights you drag out, put on there, have no effect on our character whatsoever. They just don't. So it's like, well, how do I get stuff to affect this and that, which are all built from 3 different kinds of subsystems for how I'm achieving, how we achieve that part of a thing and that part of a thing and that part of a thing are all 3 different subsystems. And you have to build one thing in the middle that can talk to all of them in such a way that it will affect all of them the proper way.
Sure.
So it really comes down to observation, integration, understanding, expression, right? So for us, and this goes back, I've been studying non-photorealistic style renderers and computer graphics since 1999. So I've been at it for a minute. And
not 3 weeks.
Andrew taught me in 1998. I've been at it since 1999. Wow. So anyhow, it's all about like what makes a painting a painting and what makes a photo a photo. And so you have to get right down to the details of like, how does that work? How does that look? What is doing that? And understanding that and saying, okay, now I have to create a system that will recreate that same element. And so the first part is to observe, like really observe, not just the sky's blue. Is it? Sometimes it is. Some parts of it is. Other parts of the same sky are not blue at the same time. So like really asking those granular questions. And this is the basis of all art. Asking the granular questions. What is it? And then integrating it, meaning I get it in my head, like I've identified it. Now, do I understand why? Okay, do I understand it? If I understand it, now I can express it. So that's my pathway for all of these things. So I look at any painting that we're given as a challenge. Like season 3, we got ice and snow coming up, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at that, we're going, okay, Garrett, get me a painting. First thing I need is a painting. Because once
which you're saying to Garrett, who has been studying the other discipline, all of this time, and then all of the hours that he's put into understanding and expressing are now being transferred to you to do the same version.
Yeah, it's all art. It's just my interpretation of it is just a little more.
But technical. It's a whole other discipline that you're bringing to it.
Yeah. So then once I get the painting, then I know, okay, here's the characteristics of that goes into this. How do we represent these and capture them in such a way that is honest and true to the painting?
Yeah.
So it's a fun challenge. It's one of the most exciting challenges in my entire career.
And how boomerang is it for you to think about all that? Hey, let's make the art of book feel like the show.
Yeah.
Which we did. And now an art of book on the back end of it.
It's a little surreal, honestly. I never really imagined us making an art of book. And then when Brock came up with the idea like an art of book, I'm like, well, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So
This is an amazing moment.
And the fun little game to play is when you get the book, go ahead and see if you can spot which scenes these paintings are in, because we're putting a lot of stuff in here that, of course, there's a lot of stuff leading up to it, but a lot of things that are in this book are on the screen.
Yep.
It's
Well,
not
and
like
it's on the screen, maybe with characters cluttering it up,
well, sure, we have other things that integrated into it, but yeah, these aren't just ideas that were useful for a moment and then moved on from. These are final executions that are in there.
What I love about the whole time I'm listening to you talk, like about
The sound of my voice.
the
melodiousness
sound of your
it.
voice, but that great conversation we had at Chipotle where I explained all this to you.
Yeah.
So proud of you for pulling off. No, I was just thinking that like the reason I'm assuming here, but part of what I know about you is that you love storytelling. Like you're not just geeking out about computer programs and like the thing that you get excited about. And so in the scene that you were talking about, Poto fighting Slarb in the cellar, like what you're thinking about is not just I want to make something beautiful and I want to make all these elements work, but the reason you're wanting to make them work is because you don't want this scene to break the story.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like the whole thing is like there's this story that's being told and there's this family sitting there watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And like your team, just like Garrett's team and all the other teams, they're carrying a tray, which is like this suspension of disbelief that the family is experiencing.
Sure.
And you're working really hard to make this work, not just because you're a nerd. And you are a giant nerd.
Huge.
No, but because like we're all each member of the team is serving the story in this beautiful way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the thing is like the folks watching this, you are our customer. You're the boss. You're the one we're thinking about all the time on all of this. Because it's easy, and I've seen it happen, and it happens a lot in some of the bigger studios where they have the budget to kind of get lost in wormholes, is you'll get individual artists who are just so hung up on doing their one thing that they lack a sense of context and connection to the audience, and they just do it because I like it. I think it's cool. I don't care what I think is cool, although I have opinions. I care what works for the story. I care what works with the art, because I know that Garrett and his team are bringing an honest approach, and I'm Chris, with you being showrunner on this, you're bringing an honest approach to this, constantly thinking about what can we do, and we also want to make this worth your time. If you're going to sit down as a family and hit that play button, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste your time showing you stuff that feels cheap, that feels sloppy, that feels ho-hum. So,
and if you're lucky, all of those elements and all those people come together and create this one kind of mysterious moment for a kid.
I hope
watching the
so.
show.
Yeah.
It's amazing. That's the hope.
If I was a kid, this show, I would be so on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
same.
I would be like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I'm hoping somebody out there thinks this is the coolest thing ever.
At least we do. Well, amazing. I can't believe we've got an art book in the world. Thank you all for supporting us in the journey, all you fans that have watched the show and supported us, all our investors. It's our joy to make this thing, and we hope you enjoy getting to have a physical version at your house. Soon enough, the DVD and Blu-ray will be out there, which is another physical thing you can actually put your hands to. But we're excited for you guys to get to see this 150-page book that commemorates all the work from season 1.
It's super gratifying as a person who works in the ephemeral world of electronic pixels to have something that you can pick up and has weight and heft and is real. There is, like, I'm every bit as proud of everything in here, but having it in my hands and being able to look at it and go, it just feels, I'm a real boy now.
That's true. Good. So angel.com/wingfeather art. You guys can go pre-order the book right now if you want to. And of course, every one of these things that we make for you guys is for you and also helps support the show. It helps us to make more. We're deep in season 2, making really cool stuff. And now even in season 3 in pre-production, which is incredible. Season 2 will be out in the spring. Can't wait. Keith, thanks for jumping in with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Always good to see you.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, what would you do with it? And so we have our top 3 tonight, and we're excited to reveal these. All right, everybody, thanks again for joining us on this one. The Art of Wingfeather Season 1 is out there, ready for pre-order, and thank you so much for supporting us. If you want to win your own free copy, just tag a friend in the comments, and we'll pick one and announce it tomorrow on our Instagram stories. So, all right, we have had a couple of weeks for this Wingfeather Sing-Off celebrating our soundtrack, which is out on all platforms. Go listen to it. It's got some amazing performances from Arcadian Wild, Andrew here, and of course our dear friend Jody Benson. More to come on that, by the way. We're doing some other cool stuff with her. She plays Nia in the show, and it's just been such a great supporter. But we asked you, hey, what would you do with the song My Love Has Gone Across the Sea? You know, I remember hearing you sing it with Sky years ago.
Long time ago.
On a guitar at a certain book release party. And here we are, you know, this many years, and so many people have covered it. And so we asked you, hey, what would you do with it? And so we have our top 3 tonight, and we're excited to reveal these. So first up, we have Music with Emily Schmitz as our 3rd place. Check this out.
I'll watch for you the winter long and sing for you a summer song. And if you can't return to me, then I will sail to you instead.
Yes, that's so good. Beautiful.
Thank you, Emily Schmitz and daughter. That was beautiful.
Wonderful.
It's such a happy, sad song. I'm in this happy, sad season right now. It's the fall, I suppose.
Yeah.
My daughter, Juliet, just went off to college. And it's her first week.
It's going to be okay, man.
The house is very quiet.
You lost your voice.
I lost my voice. But she's one of our songbirds, right? Always music around the house. And she's gone. It's like the house.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. It's different. All right, 2nd place. Duncan is Cookie 7. We love this. Check this out.
Duncan.
So good.
Good job, Duncan. I happen to know there's no sheet music for that song. I don't think, which means that he learned that by ear, which
Figured
is
it out.
really good. Way to go,
Well done.
Duncan.
Good job. All right, and here it is. Thank you all for submitting for the Wingfeather Sing-Off. It's just been a blast. Here is our 1st place. This is Captain Lark. Check this out.
Through towering wave and shriek of gale, I'll aim my vessel ever west and steer it by the cord that bound my heart to yours until you're found. And should you find my body pale and get upon the lonely shale, rejoice, my love, and call me blessed in death, my love. I loved you best.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Captain Lark.
Beautiful, Captain Lark. Thanks to everybody who submitted. What a cool thing.
If you want to see more of these, just search for the hashtag Wingfeather Sing-Off, and you should be able to find them on the various social platforms. But thank you all so much for jumping in with us to celebrate our new soundtrack. All right, so we have debuted our Art of book. It is out in the world. It's real. You can order yours today, and we hope you will. Be a great way to introduce friends to the series. If they haven't watched it, maybe this will be something to help them to get interested in it.
Yeah.
Listen, we have some cool stuff coming up in the next couple weeks. We're doing a live stream as we've been doing every Thursday. Next week, new Roblox edition, so tune in for that. and lots more cool products coming out, including the new book from you coming out right at the beginning of November.
A Ranger's Guide to Glipwood Forest.
Tell us about this book. What is this?
It is kind of like a Pembroke's Creaturepedia, little informational guide to traversing the wilds of the most dangerous forest in Scree. So I decided to go back, and Pembroke actually writes the foreword to this book because he discovered an old edition of this book and it answered some questions that he'd had about Glipwood Forest. But it was written in the second epic, so like hundreds and hundreds of years before the Wingfeather Saga that we know. And so yeah, it's the original Rangers who tamed the forest, and it's pretty fun. I had a great time writing.
Right at the beginning of November, so it's going to be a busy fall.
Yeah.
Lots of cool new stuff. Like I said, our new DVD and Blu-ray is coming out. We're going to do some celebration around that. But lots of cool things to keep your eyes and ears open for. Thank you.